All right, welcome to the Bow Trader Podcast. Whether you're a long-time listener or joining us for the first time, man, I'm glad you're here. My name's John Keene, and I am the founder of Bow Trader, and we're just excited to be able to do this podcast and bring this to you on a weekly basis. You know, on the podcast, we're diving headfirst into the wild world of hunting and the great outdoors. We talk about all kind of different things, whether it's tracking and scouting tactics or just cutting up and telling silly tales and stories about things that we've gotten into when we've been out there trying to do some hunting. But we're always focused on the beauty of God's creation. From gear reviews and how to practice to finally making it to that awesome thwack of fall. Buddy, we are here for it. Our faith is woven into every episode with real, down-to-earth discussions because it's not just about the hunt. It's truly about what matters most. So grab your gear, settle in, get you a cup of coffee, and let's get after it. All right, we got the machine on. We'll get rolling. So we're going to talk food plots today. And man, we were knee deep into it before we even hit the button here. So we're going to try to bring you guys into the fold a little bit. But it is officially May. So it's definitely time to start thinking food plots. You know, we've crossed into I think we're sitting at 128 days until opening day. So
still holding on to turkey season a little bit.
Yeah, but. I mean, we got 7 days of turkey season left, right?
Holding on.
I have entered that time of the year where I start telling people every day that you need to shoot your bow. Every day, shoot your bow. Because, I mean, like if you shoot your bow 3 times a day on average between now and opening day, that's like 500 times, 400 times, somewhere in that neighborhood, right? If you go up to 5 times a day, that's almost 700 shots that you've put through.
You're talking about a week, sorry. You saying a week or a day?
A day.
Oh, dang.
So
yeah, I'm not pulling my bow out 3 times a day.
Hey,
I ain't got time for it right now.
Come on, man. Well, if you average it, so if you're only going to shoot once a week, then shoot 50 times when you pull your bow out.
Yeah.
Really go over it and make sure everything's working like it's supposed to.
3 shots per day.
I am a huge proponent of cold shots because that's what you're taking when you're hunting.
True. Yeah.
So
instead of I got it.
No, I'm saying 3 shots.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. I can't tell you how important I think that is because when you're in a hunting situation, you go on a hunt, you might go on a week-long hunt to shoot once, and that shot's got to count. So how good are you at that cold shot, And if you practice that cold shot over and over again, just shoot 3 times in the morning before you go to work or in the afternoon when you get home from work. And, if you don't have the time to keep shooting or whatever, that's fine. All you're trying to do is teach yourself that cold shot because that's the shot that matters, So now, do I also want people out shooting their bow 50 times at a clip? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you'd be shocked. You'd be amazed at what having those cold shots is going to do.
Absolutely.
So that's where I'm coming from with that. But anyway, let's talk food plots because it is, we're getting into that time where we need to do it.
Or at least prep.
Pulling soil samples. If you've never done that before, it's not a huge deal. The easiest way to do it. I don't like using any of the little kits or anything like that.
Yeah, don't waste your time with that. You just go to your we've got a UGA extension office. Yep. They've literally got the free paper bags for you to fill out. They've got a line on there. It literally says dirt line. Go out to a food plot. Don't just dig a hole and fill it up with just one hole. Take a subset sample. If you're looking at a square, hit all 4 corners and get a couple in the center, and you mix it in a clean bucket. Mix that dirt up, and you're not going 3 foot down. You're digging the first 6 or so inches, and you mix it together. Make sure you get all the organic matter out, so any grasses and stuff like that, because that could kind of sway some results, but not really. They normally sift through that. But
don't mix it in a metal bucket.
Yeah, or a bucket,
like a galvanized bucket,
or one you change your oil in. Do a clean bucket.
Buckets are $3 at Lowe's. That is my shopping cart of choice.
Oh my gosh, that's literally mine too.
I buy a bucket every time I go to Lowe's.
You can't have to me.
You can't.
You really can't. It's not possible. So every time I go to Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that, I go over and I pick up a bucket. I need a new tape measure always. Yep. Every time you go, you got to get a new tape measure. Need a new chalk line because nobody can keep up with a chalk line. No. And you go through and get those things, and then you go to the checkout, and it's like, well, I guess I got to buy my bucket.
Yeah, buy a $3 bucket. Stockpiled. It's like, yes, right, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, sending the soil sample off to UGA. I think it used to be $7. Is it
still $7? I think they've got
It used to be $5.
Yeah, it's $7 now. Inflation.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I will say the turnaround time has been a little slack. I sent some out for some dove fields we're doing, and I had to call to like, hey, I hadn't seen this, and it's been like 3, maybe 4 weeks.
Really? Okay.
And I think I don't know. I think the writing on the bag was a little off, and they might have just not. Either way, I got it in the mail, the physical mail, before I got it on email.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was going to say, since they started doing the email,
it's normally pretty quick, within 7 to 10 days. Yeah. But this last one, I was like, man, this is taking a little long.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get the results on that. I mean, so on the bag itself, the best way to do it is like if you have a name for your food plot or whatever, you put the name of that food plot just so you can keep up with all of it. It then has a line for the crop that you're going to be planting. So if it's a corn or a sunflower, or if it's going to be a clover, you put that on there. That way, when they give you the report, it's custom to whatever crop you're going to be putting in the food plot.
Or if you want to do one for your garden when you're doing this, you just write garden on there.
Yeah, it's just
vegetable garden. You put that on there.
So that allows the results of it to customize to, okay, what's the optimal pH level? What is the optimal micro minerals and stuff like that need to be there? And then it just gives you a spit out of, okay, this is how much phosphorus, nitrogen that you need to meet your goals.
How much lime you need to put.
Yeah, lime you need
calcium or whatever. It gives you everything.
Then you just go to your local either co-op, or we've got Bullock Fertilizer. Shout out to them. They do a great job. I'll send it to them. They'll give me a custom blend basically to what my needs are. I can rent a spreader for $200 a day, and I hook it up to hydraulics on my tractor, and they preset it to whatever speed my tractor is. It slings it, and it'll sling it about 50 feet on either side, and you can cover some ground pretty quick. So then you also could just if you didn't do a custom blend, you can find a blended bag that's already pre-made. Like if you got these little smaller plots, you can find a blend that's closest to what the prescription is, and kind of do it from there. The thing we're dealing with right now is April is normally we've normally got rain that's somewhat consistent, but we have been very dry. Very, very dry. We got a lot of farmers praying for rain right now. So soil moisture is another thing. And we can kind of get on soil moisture later, but I guess the prep side is super important. Mainly because if you don't have the right pH, the crop itself is not going to do what it needs to do.
Well, your fertilizer and everything is not gonna have the same effect.
It doesn't uptake
if your pH is wrong, because the plant is just not, it's just not in a healthy environment to start with. And So from a pH standpoint, let's say you pull a soil sample and your pH is sitting at like 6, or 5.5 maybe, and your optimal pH for what you're growing. All right, let's use sunflowers as an example. That's a good food plot seed for birds, and it's good for deer. Deer love it. Okay, so your pH for that needs to be somewhere around 7. And so if you're sitting at 5.5 or 6 and you need to get to 7, you're looking at probably a ton to the acre of lime. Now, let's say you've got a very small food plot and it says a ton to the acre. It's not like you've got to go out and you've got to rent a spreader or something. If you've got a quarter of an acre to work with, you can go out with a bucket of lime and spread it, by the bucket. Just take your hand. The lime's not going to hurt you, right? Just take your hand and scatter that stuff out over the food plot and basically take that bare dirt and turn it white. That's basically what you want to do.
Top dress it.
And that's gonna get you somewhere close to a ton an acre. And you can judge it a little bit. If you need a ton to the acre and you've got a quarter of an acre that you're working with, well, you need 500 pounds of lime. So it's not. I don't want us to talk through this because this is something we do all the time. And we skip over stuff and make it sound like it's super overwhelming because it's really not that bad.
You can make it as difficult or as easy as you like. I mean, it's one of those
just
things.
Like life.
Just like anything else. I mean, you can get super in the weeds, pun intended. You can get super technical on it and get overwhelmed, but in the end, making sure your pH levels basic. It's neutral basically. It's a 7 pH is across the board. If you've got a 7, a 6 to 7 pH, you're going to be able to grow just about anything. Sandy soils down here were super acidic, and so we are constantly having to apply lime on pretty much everything that we've got. This time of year also smells like chicken litter when you're driving down the road because we got farmers slinging that around. So it's that time of year where people are preparing. There's a couple fields around here. I already got corn shin high, which I'm thoroughly impressed with the lack of rain that we've had, that it's had that much soil moisture. But I wanted to mention something else. May is a month where it's super important not to crank up the old bush hog. I always like to remind folks to leave the old bush hog under the barn or wherever. This is super, super crucial time of year for poults and chicks and just critters in general.
Fawns.
And fawns,
Fawns will start dropping in a couple of weeks here.
So it's just important that even though we are preparing the soil on food plots, it's a smaller area, but your roadways and stuff like that, just leave them dirty. Leave them. I know it looks nice to have them all cleaned up, but it's super important to kind of leave those edges rough, to let the critters do what they're doing. So I wanted to shout out for the fawns and poults and the chicks that are being born right now. So they already got an uphill battle, so we might as well not fight against them, fight with them.
Yeah, no doubt, man. But so when you're looking at doing a food plot, everybody that I talk to is always super concerned about what seed they're going to use. What mix do I need to have? What seed do I need to put out there? What's going to be the best? What can I plant one time and it's going to last the whole season and all that kind of stuff? And all that is important, but I'm telling you, do not skip the step of testing that soil and figuring out where you're at, so you know what you're working with, because you're going to get so much better results if you've got a good foundation to work off of to make sure that dirt's where it needs to be. And like Jace was saying, especially where we live here, it's super sandy. So, I mean, it's like it is a constant that you're having to put lime out because it's our soil leaches so much, especially in the way of lime. So it just seems like it's something that you're always having to add. Unfortunately, if you put lime out in May, you're not going to feel 100% of the effects of that this season. I mean, it is going to make it better, but you're not going to feel 100% of the effects of it. That's one of those things that is an ongoing, kind of a perennial thing that you need to be doing for your soil. But my opinion is it's worth doing it.
Yeah.
Even if you're on lease ground that you don't know if you're going to have it next year, you know what? So what?
Yeah.
Leave it better than you found it.
That's right.
It is going to make for you to have a better crop. And the thing is, weeds will grow really good in acidic soil.
Yep.
They thrive in acidic soil, right?
They do.
And the desirable stuff that we're planting will not thrive in it. It'll struggle in it. We can still get it to grow, but we've got to do more work to make it happen. We've got to put in more inputs. We got to hope for timely rain and all that kind of stuff. And we got to hope that they're going to somehow choke out those weeds that are really going to grow well in that acidic soil. So those are the reasons behind doing that stuff. And it's just, I don't know about you guys, but it's frustrating when I know I'm wasting time.
Yeah.
And when you go out and you plant something and you haven't done just a little bit of extra work to make sure that you're, in the best position for it, you've really wasted a lot of time.
Well, time and money, because to be real, the seed nowadays, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
It's not cheap at all. We're doing some dove fields, and man, they are proud of them sunflowers and the corn as well. So, I'm doing like 6 to 10 acre plots here and there. I feel it for the farmers that are having to buy seed for hundreds of acres. But you got to make sure you do your prep work. We were talking offline earlier, just to kind of switch it up just a little bit, about frost seeding some clover. And I know we're 85-degree days now, so we're on the back end of that, but just another strategy too, kind of a low impact deal, but frost seeding is one of those times when you're the transition from winter to spring, where you've got those cold mornings where you've got the layer of frost on the ground. Some of your plots that you've got already from the fall, most of their crops they've already been ate down and they're down to the ground. Frost seeding is just a really good strategy just to have a cover crop on the ground. It's really good protein, but that freeze thaw period is what helps kickstart and germinate that clover. And we've been doing it for a number of years just to kind of keep a supplement on the ground. So that's another strategy that's super helpful and super good. And it carries over these lactating lactating does and these bucks while they're starting to put on antlers. I was driving the other day, saw a buck in the edge of a field and already starting to see some growth. And so it's happening. So this is the building blocks for what we're pursuing in October and November. So it's just cool to see that. But yeah, I wanted to mention the frost seeding since we had talked about it offline.
Yeah, it makes it's a pretty easy concept because you're not having to prepare a seed bed or anything like that. You just kind of go out and scatter that seed. Mm-hmm. And it's just sitting right there on top. And like Jace was saying, it germinates because of that constant moisture that it gets every day.
Yep.
So it makes it pretty simple.
That's right.
But yeah, so we can talk about food plot seed. I've got some sitting right here on the table right now. This is some of the pure whitetail seed that we actually carry here in the shop. Most of these, I think, are these bags will do. Yeah, these bags will do a quarter acre. It says quarter acre. They're 5 pound bags. So they are $35 for a 5 pound bag. We've got anything from some no till. It's called Shady Patch that if you have a spot back in the woods, all right, so let's look at that from a quick standpoint real quick, because of the storms we had last year and how, we've talked all season, all this time leading up to this, we talked about how much our season was affected last year because of, just the change in the landscape from trees being blown over and everything. So you may have some areas that, you're looking at now and you're like, man, if I could get a piece of equipment back here, I could put a food plot in.
Yeah.
Well, you don't necessarily have to do that. This seed that I'm looking at right now is called a no-till seed. Basically, it's just seed that germinates really easily.
It's like a throw and grow.
Yeah, it's ryegrass.
Put it on concrete and it'll spread.
Yeah, really. It's ryegrass, white clover, and let's see, what is it? Ryegrass, white clover, forage rape, and Winfred forage brassica. So it's basically a bag of weeds that deer like to eat.
They'll eat them.
But
it'll literally, like, if it has any moisture, that'll germinate.
Yep.
I mean, you can put it on the top of a center block and it'd probably establish.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then another one that I've got here that I really like is this is one that you need to plant later in the year. It's got turnips, sugar beets, and then brassica in there. So that's going to be that food plot that's like the food plot that you think of. When you think of food plot, that's what you think of seeing. It doesn't have peas in it, which are really good. It doesn't have soybeans in it. It doesn't have corn in it, but it's got a bunch of those root crops in there that have those really good leafy tops that grow out of the ground that the deer love. And I love seeing a buck walk up to it and tear one of those turnips out of the ground and just sit there munching on it. I can think of a time where I watched a deer grab a whole turnip,
pull out of the ground, like
it was a turnip or a radish or something. He pulled the whole thing out of the ground. He's sitting there holding it right at the base of the root, and he's just chewing on it. I mean, that's just cool. Looking around, just sitting there chewing on it.
That's cool.
So they love that stuff. So. And I love watching them.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's one of the coolest parts about hunting is being able to get out there and watch these guys. See how they make it happen, and because a lot of times, I'll see a buck and I'm like, I'm not shooting him. I mean, because if he's not where I think he could be, I just don't. I just sit there and watch.
You're talking just age-wise and stuff.
Yeah, like that. I mean, if I just think there's more that he's going to do,
more potential. Absolutely.
I just don't shoot him. Mm-hmm. So
I think too, food plots are really good. One, just from a nutrition standpoint, but if you looked at and I don't have the data in front of me, but I'm thinking back on a couple National Deer Association things, but the diet from a food plot is for whitetail deers in particular is pretty low from the wide span of a year, but it does hold and sustain them in your areas that you're hunting. So when you look at it, it's important to maintain those, keep those. If you're wanting to get after it, doing a spring and a summer plot is important, just because it's honestly almost more important than the winter plots, just because although everything is green right now, it's not always the stuff that they need. And by need is like there's not just things popping up everywhere that's got a lot of protein, or the does need certain minerals and stuff like that for lactation. So even though
they need fat,
they need a lot of content.
Yeah.
So having a concentrated area that makes it easier for them to do that just increases their likelihood of having successful hatches or fawnings. So that's super important. Had something else I was thinking about. Just had a brain fart.
It happens, man. That's what I get for scheduling these things early in the morning.
No. No, it's just super important. Oh, I guess what I was getting at. Yeah, so you've got your spring and summer food plots, and then you got your winter food plots. Obviously, we're not quite there, but I think it is important, like we're talking about, just having it at the forefront of your mind of, hey, if I'm not going to do a summer or spring summer food plot, this is kind of the time where I can even start pulling samples now and start at least preparing for, okay, what am I going to need to be successful for that time? So it's just a good time right now just to daydream about seeing that whitetail eaten out of the food plot and kind of preparing for that.
Yeah. The sooner the better.
Yeah,
is what I would say
for sure.
Because if you pull that soil sample and you find out you need lime or you need something, go ahead and get it out there.
Yep.
You know, lime is not something that, even if you haven't prepared your seed bed, even if you haven't done anything, you just know this is where a food plot's going. You don't have to go out there and do anything to it. Just go spread the lime on it. You know, and it's going to start doing its thing. It's going to start working into the soil, you know, as it rains and stuff like that. So you're going to be putting yourself in a good position. So let's kind of pivot a little bit and look at seed blends and what to do and when to do it. And I think that, Jace, just like you were saying, you know, you need to understand what role you're trying to fill with the food plot, right? And when we look at our hunting properties, what do we have that the deer are going to be eating? You know, so if we've got a hunting property with a ton of white oaks on it, you know, we don't really need a food plot that's going to be available while those white oaks are going to be dropping, or let's just say we got a bunch of hard mass, a bunch of oak trees. They're going to be dropping acorns starting sometime in late September or early October, depending on what our summer looks like.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. And that are going to drop until sometime in November. You're going to be hard pressed to pull those deer off of that, you know. But so when you're looking at your hunting property and saying, okay, I've got food available during this time. What do I do to supplement that? What do I do? You know, what things do I need to put in? What time frame does it need to fall under? And if you'll just go at it from that angle with trying to put a strategy together, you know, you don't have to be a horticulturist. You don't have to be an agri-scientist or anything like that to really put something together. You're just trying to put food on the table for them, you know, and do it in a way that it's going to work for how you're able to hunt your farm or how you're able to hunt your property. Yeah. You know, locate these food plots in spots where, you know, you're able to capitalize on those travel corridors. We're in the Southeast. Deer are no respecter of trails down here for the most part. They just kind of walk wherever they want to walk.
Do what they want.
You know, but they do go from this area to this area. Yeah. And if there's a food plot along the way, chances are they're going to visit that food plot at some point. So that's the thing that I always look at from a food plot standpoint of, is what am I providing? What time frame do I want it to hit in? Yep. And then kind of, you know, begin with the end in mind instead of just saying, I want a food plot right here. I'm going to go plant a food plot right here. Well, you may, you know, this sitting field of dreams, build it and they will come. Yeah. You know, you got to give them a compelling reason. Yeah. You know, I mean, you could have the most beautiful food plot, but if you've got 40 acres of oak trees that are dropping, they ain't coming out there. Yeah. I'm just telling you, they're not going to do that.
Yeah. And then you get caught up in the mix of watching like YouTube hunts of people out in Illinois and stuff, and they've got 30 acre to 150 acre like cornfields. You're like, man, that's pretty cool. Whereas like here, that's not very realistic, or it could be, but there's just not a lot of that going on. So I wanted to bring up too, just on food plots in general, like what is the reason for having a food plot? My thoughts are you're providing a food source throughout, depending on what you pick, like John's saying, depending on what your choice of seed or what you're going to put in the ground, like a clover or something that's a perennial, comes back every year. It's something that you're just maintaining with a clethodim or a 2,4-D, which is just a broadleaf. It kills everything but the clover. So you're just maintaining that as a
so
perennial.
those are herbicides that you were just talking about. Something to kill the weeds.
Yeah, something to kill the weeds with. Or if you're using more of an annual, which is mostly your normal run of the mill seed blends. The reason, like we're saying, is preparing and coming up with a plan as to why am I doing a food plot? Is it to support just deer? Is it to be a mixed bag of upland birds, turkey and deer? So, and then also think about it from this standpoint too. Shot opportunities, like ethical shot opportunities. Having a food plot, one is a great opportunity to get youth to have success seeing critters. But also it gives opportunity to slow down for a second and actually have some ethical shot opportunities. So like we're talking about, if there's an area that you've got an idea of a food plot, man, give it a whirl. Just don't get overwhelmed with it, and definitely just take it with a grain of salt. And there's so much research and so many YouTube videos and this and that on it, that you can be a YouTube university certificate winner pretty quick. So I don't know. I just would encourage y'all to come figure out what's your reasoning behind the food plot, and then kind of figure out a game plan from there. So that was my thoughts on that.
So Brandon, what about you? I know that you said that y'all did peas in a food plot last year, I guess.
It was just a mix. It had a lot of cowpeas, just a big mix of peas. It had sorghum in it. It had some different things. And what was interesting is the first time this area had ever been planted with anything other than basically rye. Mm-hmm. And which I don't care for that. I'd rather just not.
But it's so pretty.
Yeah, but, I just would rather not even do it. Like, it's just so. Anyway, what was interesting is the deer didn't eat it, and I don't know how much the pH levels affect like the palatability of the crop.
A little bit,
but like we had beautiful food plots. I didn't lime anything. Yeah. I didn't do a soil sample. So I'm kind of late to the game on a lot of this. That's why I call you all the time.
For sure.
And so, so I'm still learning a lot about it. So I've been kind of quiet, is because I'm just like bouncing back and forth between you two, trying to learn more about it. But I've always been a dog hunter for most of my life, and so you don't need a food plot.
You let the dogs go.
You go to a thicket and you just dump them out. And, right. And so, but I've gotten more and more into bow hunting. And so this is really something that, and I enjoy the prep as much as the hunting. And so, but what was really, really interesting is we had beautiful food plots. I mean,
they were gorgeous.
When I sent you pictures,
they were gorgeous. I was like, man, these look really, really good.
The deer, and I mean, it's just like, a blind hog finds a nut every now and then, right? Because I didn't do soil samples, I didn't lime, I did fertilize, but I mean, I just put like a 10-10-10 on it, and so, but like the deer would walk out in the food plot, and it's like chest high in peas and all kinds of stuff, but like they were not eating it.
Yeah, it was not a highly frequented plot, which like you're saying, like this is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, but something was just off.
Yeah.
Did they ever revisit it like later in the winter at all, or?
And this could totally be like not connected in any way. But what I did is I went out and I put just some corn out in the food plot. And
like, hey guys, we're over here.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is you can eat this.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting when I did that in a couple of the food plots, they started eating it. And So it was just really wild. I'm like,
the food plot was just so thick they had to eat their way down to the corn.
that's what it was. Yeah, they're like, we want that corn.
Yeah, like, wait a second, that actually tastes kind of good.
But it was just very interesting that we had these great looking food plots. I don't know why, they weren't eating it. We would get pictures of deer in them, but a lot of times, at least early on, they were just passing through.
Yeah.
Now, later in the season, they started spending more time eating it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it took a while for them to – it was almost like you walked through, like, I don't know, a restaurant and you see food on the tables and you're like, huh. And you just keep walking, like, you don't realize you can just, like, sit down and eat.
Sit down and eat.
And so it was kind of crazy, and I really don't know the reason.
Yeah.
But I would send Jace pictures, and I'm like, there'd be like I remember one picture I had 4 bucks that were in the food plot, but they were just like kind of passing.
Hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, and maybe they were eating it more than I thought, but I never really saw where they were snipping it off much. Yeah. And it just wasn't, we weren't getting the pictures in those food plots that we would get on a pile of corn.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. It was interesting to me, and I don't know enough about it to know why. But they were not eating it. And everything I've ever seen or experienced with peas is normally you can't get them to grow.
Right.
If you have a decent, deer population, because they're just mowing them down.
Yeah, that's right.
And we do have a ton. We got too many does, man. Yep. I mean, it's not like there's a lack of deer. Yeah. It was just, they weren't eating it.
Yeah. Like you're saying too, it was a new area that had never been planted. So who knows if it was just a spot that they just weren't frequenting. But yeah, that is super interesting. I'll be interested to see how it works out this year.
Yeah, they might just like starches. I don't know. I mean, just aren't for the green stuff. Kind of like a kid.
Yeah,
they're like, I don't want to eat the green beans.
Salads.
No salads.
Every farmer listening to this is like, let me go plant some cotton.
Yeah,
they'll eat every bit of it.
Wear it out.
Whatever that's about, man. That's crazy how they'll eat so much cotton.
And that's the other thing too is like I wonder. And this was a question I was going to ask, is like, when you do have so much ag around, obviously there's certain things that they would probably choose over cotton. But like, I've got a place this year that there'll probably be 50 acres of peanuts planted in a spot where I'm looking at possibly planting a dove field.
Yep.
Just a small area. And then also planting a food plot.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, and this is a question I had, is if I do spend the time, the money, everything to plant this plot, that's probably going to be 5 to 8 acres. Like, is it worth it with 50 acres of peanuts?
Yeah, you're competing with peanuts. So
the peanuts are going to be done pretty quick, though. I mean, the deer are going to hit the peanuts right after they first come up. Like they're gonna really work on them, and then they'll continue to graze on the peanuts as they're growing. But then in September or October, when those peanuts get dug, it's like
they're done.
Like immediately over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So honestly, it's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
So they're planning your spring and summer food plot for you.
Yeah.
So the protein and all that they're acquiring by nipping the tops and stuff like that, there's no need of you wasting money and focusing on your spring and summer food plot.
Right.
You need to focus more on your, after peanuts are harvested, now there is no longer that crop. Let's backfill it with something else.
So planting something, I mean, because I know a lot of times your fall winter stuff gets planted in September, right? So
September, October.
Is that going to fill that need though? Because I mean, they're going to be turning those peanuts about that same time. So is that stuff going to grow fast enough to fill the void?
It could. I mean, the acreage you're talking about, you said what, 7-8 acres?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, that's a pretty sizable area.
Yeah.
But what you probably need to do is not do that 7-8 acres just in one thing.
Yeah.
It might be good to just break it up. Like we were saying earlier, doing borders and sorghum and kind of maybe mapping it out a little bit where maybe you've got a little sliver or a corner that's got a little bit more shade. You can make that your little clover spot just so it's not direct sunlight. So you can kind of get creative with it and kind of give them the old Golden Corral treatment where it's just they got it all. They got the old fondue fountain over here.
Do some strips of corn out there and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool. You'd have to go in and plant that a little bit sooner than
for sure.
You'd probably need to plant that no later than like probably the first week of August.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hit or miss. It's either going to do really well or it's going to get zapped.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, but if it makes it, like it'll. There are some corn varieties that'll make a crop really fast.
Yeah,
and you're not necessarily. So when we say we're going to plant corn, everybody thinks standing corn with big ears on it that the deer are walking up to and eating. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the deer actually eating the corn stalk.
Yeah.
Okay.
The actively growing corn stalk, there is that plant is
lush
and
and
extremely palatable to a deer.
Yeah.
That's
the
like,
early growth of that, I'm guessing, is the best part.
That's like a kid picking up a donut.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they love it. And I would more prefer to give them something that's growing than put a pile of corn out on the ground.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get so much more out of it.
Yeah.
You know, when you go dump a pile of corn on the ground, you have a feeder that's, slinging corn twice a day or something like that. Yeah, you're attracting deer to that spot, but you're not giving the deer anything.
Yeah, nutritionally, it's basically like eating a box of goldfish. Hey, it tastes good, and I'll wear out a box of goldfish, but it ain't doing nothing good for me.
Right.
The same thing for a deer. Yeah. One of my wildlife professors at Swanee, old Scott Toriano, he was from the UP of Michigan. He would refer to it as deer ice cream.
Yeah.
White oak, you had mentioned earlier, white oak acorns, like that is deer ice cream. So like the early flush of corn, or we talked about cotton earlier, it's that new growth, that succulent end. It's got all the nutrients that those deer need, and that's why they're nipping them. And a deer is a browser. They'll walk around and nip and select different things that are specific to what their needs are, which is super, super neat. And that's, I think, one of the reasons, like when you do these blended food plots, like it allows the critter to pick what their needs are.
Yeah.
Whereas if you got a monoculture, which is just a one species plot, it just limits them to that. So
and they either like it or they don't.
Yeah, that's right.
They either want to browse on that or they don't.
Yeah.
Or they won't touch it, like we were talking about earlier, and then it's like end of November, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember there's that field over there, and they'll smack it. So it's one of those things. They know their needs.
Well, I'm pretty, I know me well enough to know that if you put a donut next to green beans,
donut's going down.
Probably gonna eat the donut. So
absolutely.
But no, I think that's really interesting, and like you just need to write, or y'all need to write food plots for dummies, or even like it would be really cool to have some type of calendar.
Yeah, it would be.
I've always thought about that would help people who are just getting into it to know, like, hey, don't forget in December you can go out and frost seed this clover.
Yep.
Hey, in April, end of April, beginning of May, go get your soil samples, get the lime out. Just things like that the person who doesn't do it all the time doesn't really know. Because I'm like what you said. I'm either calling you or YouTubing something, trying to figure it out, or reading. And so those are the things I think that could help. Like these seeds are good to plant in our area, because you can search stuff, but I don't care what you plant in Kansas. I don't care what you plant in Iowa.
And most of the stuff you're watching on YouTube is kind of that area.
Yeah,
so it's like, well, that
not
doesn't
much
apply
for the Southeast.
Me.
Yeah. And I'm always harping on this, but I'm like, come do like a massive whitetail show in Bullitt County. Like, come do that here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And because it's just different.
It's totally different.
And so, I don't know. It's one of those things though that I think would be really cool, like an easy resource for people to have that would give them, like, I don't know, you could make it as detailed as you wanted to, you know, so if you got this crop, this ag is near you, because everybody's got ag.
Yeah, right? Around here for sure.
And so if this ag's near, like, this is the best approach. I don't know. You can make it as detailed as you wanted to, but I'm trying to help you become a millionaire.
Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate that. No, and I think too, like you're saying though, like being strategic with it. So we're talking about if you're in an area where there's ag and you've got neighbors, or even on your property you've got ag, if you've used prescribed fire in areas, so you've got a early good flush of succulents this time of year that's pushing them through the growing season and all that. Being strategic with how you're managing the land and making sure it's benefiting the critters is super, super important. But again, coming up with a plan and trying to formulate and execute on that, super, super important. So
I think talking with your local farmers, if you've got the opportunity to do that, there's this weird animosity between farmers and hunters that crap needs to go away. You know, first off, hunters need to realize that this land is being used to create a livelihood. Yeah. Right. So don't just go drive through a field. Yeah. That is the number one way to piss a hunter off and not be able to hunt somewhere. To piss a farmer off. Right.
Yeah.
Because you see it every year. This time of year, somebody will say, you know, they'll put a post out on Facebook or something, and they'll say, you know, that's it. I'm done. No more hunting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm done. This happens every year. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, or which hunter drove through the field this time? You know, and it's like, man, I just use your brain a little bit. It's not just a field of dirt. No, it's actually they're actually using it to feed their families. It is their livelihood, and these farmers are already up against it. You know, I mean, we got farmers right now that have booked some of their cotton at 65 cents a pound. Let me let y'all in on a secret. They know going into the year they're not going to make any money. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to tell you right now. I mean, they could have, especially if they've got dry land, which means that it's not area. Okay. They know that chances are, you know, unless the government comes in with some kind of support system, some kind of support program, they will not make a profit, and they will probably lose money on every acre of cotton that they planted. Yep. But what else are they going to do?
That's right.
You know, I mean, it's not like they're sitting there with all this equipment and they can just say, okay, well, this isn't going to be that good this year, so let's grow this. Yeah. You know, it doesn't work.
The best you can try to do is just cash flow it and make it through the year.
That's basically what's going to happen, and that's why you'll see farms it becomes harder and harder, because if you stack a couple bad years together, man, you're in bad shape. You know,
then you get a neighborhood put in that field.
That's exactly right,
and that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and how do you not do that? From a farming standpoint, you know, when you get to a certain place where your input costs keep going up, your land taxes keep going up.
Your equipment costs.
I mean, some of these cotton pickers, I mean, you might drop $1 million freaking dollars on a cotton picker.
And you're only using it
now. The truth is, hang on. The truth is that cotton picker that doesn't roll the cotton, you know, when you're going through the field, it'll still pick cotton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You could still use that cotton picker, you know. I'm just saying you could. You know, and it ain't nowhere close to $1 million price tag or $780,000 price tag or whatever it is, you know, but they know where they need to spend their money and all that kind of stuff. That's me from the outside looking in. I'm sure people could look at my business from the outside looking in and be like, John, you could probably, cut this corner right here and not have to do this.
And there's definitely things that you see, like I know farmers who are really smart that, I mean, they're very innovative in things they do, and they're successful.
Yeah.
It's just like anything, I think, it's a business. So you're going to have some who are really good at it and some that aren't as good at it. And, there's some I think of in particular that they do well because they don't have to have the brand new thing, or they're just smart and they just do things that other people don't do. And
use a cover crop, spray it, crimp it. It holds moisture in, so their seed has more success than a bare.
Well, and they're not stirring up that weed bed all the time, right? Yeah. So if you go to plant a food plot, and you take a new area. Let's say that you got a bunch of trees go down last year, and you've gone in and you've cleaned all those trees up, and now you've got this bare spot, and you're like, I'm gonna plant a food plot out there, and you go out there and you plow that up. You are going to be shocked by the dormant seeds that you're going to stir up when you go in there and chop that soil up, that they're just going to come out of nowhere. You're going to see weeds in that spot that you've never, ever seen grow right there before.
Yeah.
Simply because that seed has just been down there and it's just been dormant. Yep. Now, I'm no scientist and I can't explain to you why that happens. I can just tell you that it does.
Yeah. It's called a seed bank, and it's pretty staggering to see what comes up when you aggregate and you aggravate the soil like that, like you're saying. Just
even going in and clear cutting an area.
Yep.
You'll have weeds and stuff that'll start growing that you've never seen before. Some of it is because the soil was disturbed. You got in there and moved that dirt around. Right. You just the skidder driving over, dragging trees, that was enough to disturb it enough. So you've got that part of it, and then you've got the part where you're getting constant sunlight in there. It's causing things to start hopping and growing. So it's, to me, that is one of the parts of it that's so much fun, is to learn how this stuff works. How can you use some of that stuff to your advantage? Resist the urge to get the bush hog out and just go through and go ham on all of it and cut everything down.
That's right.
Because a lot of this stuff, especially like in a clear cut, a lot of that stuff that's going to start growing, a lot of those grasses and things like that, they're going to get super tall. And it's going to be like a step down buffer from your hardwoods on your creek bottom, moving out into the clear cut area, and then where you are able to get out in that spot and put a food plot. So it gives those deer a buffer to move through. And
they feel so comfortable. Anything that's like taller than them, they just think they're invisible. But it's so funny.
Invisible. They disappear, man.
They do, but it is cool. Like on a clear cut, when you're hunting at 15 to 18 foot high, and you can see down, and you can tell that deer is super comfortable with where he's at or she's at, and you're like, you're in the wide open,
right?
It just doesn't. Yeah. So it's that they feel comfortable, but you've got a visual on them. And that was something we had talked about earlier about like field edges, like creating edging so your deer feel comfortable going into these areas. Like a new food plot, a herd it's going to take a while for them to adjust to it, but creating either edging or soft edging or feather edging is important to kind of allow them to get comfortable to stage. They'll stage in those transition zones before they feel comfortable to go out in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
I mean, around here this time of year, like we talked about earlier, farmers they've got nuisance license, so they're actually killing does because they're
actively killing stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, stuff.
Well, and I was going to get back to that.
They're seeing their
brown is down
spotlight, and they don't use spotlights as much anymore because thermals and
so
night
big.
Vision stuff is so that used to be extremely expensive.
Yeah.
It's not that bad anymore, right? So that's what they're using now.
And the thing, going back to sort of the animosity between farmers and hunters, on the farmer side, it may be, you drove through my field. I think on the hunter side is you killed 50 deer out of my field that I hunt,
And I've fed year round.
And the thing, and I get it, right? I see both sides of it. I mean, for one party, it's a pleasure thing. For the other, it's a livelihood thing.
You're degrading my livelihood.
Yeah. And so, and you look at that, and that's a challenge. We have a little bit of land that we lease to a farmer, and he does a really good job. Like he's one of those that I think of who's very smart. He does things the right way. Mm-hmm. And so like I try to shoot some deer for him, but that gives me the ability to try to shoot the ones I want to shoot and not,
just a free for all.
Yeah. And so I try to shoot some for him. He puts me on a permit. And so try to help him out with that. But I think that's where a lot of that comes into is, for the farmer, they want to get rid of as many, and our farmer hates a deer, man. He hates a deer. And
I don't know many that
care.
Like them.
And so, I think that's where some of it comes in, especially now there's so much more focus on trophy hunting than there is on just where people used to just go out and shoot deer when they were hunting.
And I think people like to talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest for a second. I think people like to talk about trophy hunting, but I don't think people are really actively doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of when I go track a deer, I can honestly say this. I've never found a deer for somebody and they go, wow, he's a lot bigger than I thought he was.
Yeah. The ground shrinkage is a real thing.
The ground shrinkage is almost every time. Yeah. Now, there's been a few. I found one for somebody who was like a 148, and like it was legit what they thought it was. Yeah. But most of the time it's like, oh, man, I thought he was bigger than that. And so, you look at that. And so I don't disagree with you, John. I think the idea of I'm not going to shoot anything that's not a 5-year-old is great. But when that 2.5, 3-year-old comes through and he's a decent he's getting something slung at him most of the time.
Yeah.
And shoot what you want to. I don't.
Right. I don't care at all. I'm just saying. Stop saying that you're trophy management and doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
Trophy management is not dumping corn out and putting cameras everywhere. That is not trophy management. I'm sorry.
Trophy management also isn't not shooting anything but bucks. Like you have to actively kill does. Like your buck to doe ratio is super, super crucial. Yeah. And Brandon, you alluded to it earlier. Like we're covered up with deer. Like we just got does in particular. We just got does everywhere.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're not doing something to provide supplemental food for your herd, and you've got a doe to buck ratio that's like 12 to 1.
That's right,
dude. You're never going to have a big buck.
Right.
And it's not because, they can't live with a bunch of does. It's because the does are
just competition for food.
They are taking up the food source.
Yeah, for sure.
Now that doesn't mean that buck's not going to be healthy. He'll be fine. He can live like that his entire life. But he's never gonna break that threshold of becoming, what we would consider a trophy.
Right.
And like you're gonna struggle. You're going to struggle getting a deer into Boone and Crockett that's not a mainframe 10.
Yeah, you just really, don't have the time length or the number of times to get the measurement.
Yeah, it's really, really hard for an 8-point to get into Boone and Crockett.
A Boone and Crockett 8 would be
a hammer.
He's massive, man. I mean,
massive,
you're gonna have antler bases that you can barely put your hand around, right? Because you got to pick up that mass somewhere. The measurements have to come from somewhere, so it has to come from mass because you're losing an entire point.
Yep.
So that's what I'll tell people, and we can grow that stuff here. I have my own ideas of what it takes to grow that stuff here, and I've been working that kind of on our place, and I've seen stuff happen with it, and I think that food plots play a vital role, but it's like it is one piece of the puzzle.
It's just a piece of the puzzle.
It is one piece of the puzzle.
That's what's fun about it, though, is like having an impact an influence on what you're actively pursuing. Like you're providing something for them, you get to see them utilize it. Then after you harvest one, you get to you're getting the nutrients from that. It's just the circle of life that the Lord's created for us to enjoy. It's so rewarding. But yeah, it's one of those things we could get in the rabbit hole of like getting super nerdy on like how many does you should have and what you should do. But I think in the end, it's really comes down to like what your goals are, like we've been talking about. If you got young kids and you just want the kids just to see deer, like
you want a target rich environment, just let it go.
Just let it go, and you'll have more than you can have. But if you're trying to be successful on growing big bucks and stuff like that, you just got to get it's common sense. Less mouths equals more food equals bigger deer. Pretty simple on that side. So,
yeah. So one other question I have. How much land, and I think it's probably multi-factor here as well, but how much land do you need to actually be able to manage and have the potential to do it right, and actually see deer grow to something that you want it to be?
Yes.
Something unusual.
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah. There's not just a number or a silver bullet, but I do think, I don't think it matters if you own 20 acres or 2,000 acres. What I think matters is if you do have the smaller acreage, it's important to have neighbors that are on the same page as you. And that's not impossible, but it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
I've got clients that have got 1,000+ acre blocks, and they have one goal, and that's to grow big deer and to have a lot of turkeys and some quail. And so when you have stuff like that, thousands of acres, like you can execute that on a piece of property.
Sure.
But if old Billy Bob on the south boundary, like if it's brown, it's down. I got plenty of Billy Bobs. If it's brown, it's down. So you've been watching this deer for 3-4 years, and you've dumped hundreds and thousands of dollars to make sure the food plots, the feed, all that's dialed in, and he doesn't know the property. Old 4-year-old buck doesn't know the property line, and old Billy Bob gets him a nice buck. Or he gets the 2-year-old that had a lot of potential. Yeah. So again, it's just, I don't know, you just got to have, if you got good neighbors, just share photos. That's right. Be like, hey, I think this has got a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And just relay it that way.
Yeah. And a lot of it is too, man. Like, people are so secretive about this stuff, man. It's like, man, we are holding like top secret government information about terrorist organizations.
It ain't even ours.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, I don't even care. Okay. You know what? Yeah. I've done some stuff to feed these deer. I think minerals are a big deal, and I think fat's a big deal. So I feed cottonseed and I feed minerals. I have mineral spots out year round.
Yeah.
I think that is the number one thing that keeps us from growing deer in Georgia like you see in Wisconsin and Illinois. Yeah. I think the number one thing is the difference in the soil.
Yeah.
I'm convinced
of
it.
Absolutely.
So I'm constantly dumping minerals out.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's at. And, because I go up there and I hunt and I'm looking at what the deer are eating. They're eating the same thing that our deer are eating.
Mm-hmm. Math ain't mathing.
Yeah. It's like, so where's the difference? And then I start looking at, okay, maybe there's a little bit more hardwood, so let's mix some more fat in there. And I think fat, cottonseed is super high fat. It's got a lot of protein too, but it's got a lot of fat. So does this time of year, when they start lactating and they start dropping fawns, they need fat. Like when we used to grow cows and I grew up raising horses, anytime we had one dropping we had a cow dropping or we had a horse dropping, we would always boost their fat up, because they needed that to be able to produce that milk. Yeah. So that's like, to me, if there was only one thing you could do, for your deer herd, I'd say do minerals.
Yeah.
If there's only one thing you could do, you're like, I don't have time to do food plots. I don't have the space to do food plots. I don't have equipment. I don't have, an extra $2,500 to throw into food plots this year. Go buy a bucket of Jurassic Rock or a bucket of Lucky Buck once a month and dump it out in the same spot. And they will eventually get to a point where they are digging a hole trying to eat that stuff.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like just genetically,
so from a genetic standpoint, I will share a document today.
Yeah.
All right. It's like it's either 69 pages or 96 pages long. It talks about when we
Can you share the Cliff Notes of that?
No, you can upload it into chat or to Grok and let them summarize it for you. But yeah, it is the full paper, the published paper of when DNR reintroduced whitetail into Georgia and where they came from and where our deer came from. We should be able to grow monsters.
The same deer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, if you go a little bit that way, go east, you're going to see a lot of island deer.
Yeah.
And they're just not going to get
smaller.
big.
That's right.
They're a little bit bigger than goats.
Yeah.
Right. But from here up to middle Georgia, a lot of our deer came from Texas because they were concerned, okay, if we bring those Wisconsin deer down here, we're concerned that there was some kind of a bovine fly that they were worried about they were going to be susceptible to. So they kind of had a line, it kind of runs with the fall line.
Yeah.
Right. That they didn't really come below, but there were still some that came below.
Yeah.
So
are there big deer in Texas?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, for sure.
Some hammers.
Big old wide red deer. So a lot of ours came from Texas to this area. You get above like the Macon area and going further north, a lot of those came from Wisconsin and Ohio.
Okay.
So that's why when you see those deer that are killed, from like Forsyth, Georgia up, they'll have a big red patch between their antlers. That's a Wisconsin deer.
All day.
So basically, then there can't be an excuse of genetics or limiting what we can do here.
The genetics are here. It's just we don't let them. The main thing is we don't let them get old enough.
Yeah.
They get hit by a car, or they get shot by Billy Bob.
Yeah.
Or we're not utilizing the ground that we have in a way that allows them to reach their full potential.
Yeah. What about the difference in, say, the number of mature 8 points we have versus the number of mature, say, 10 points? And I'm not hunted a lot out of Georgia, but people who do tend to tell me they see a lot more 10s, 12s, different, than, say, here.
Yeah.
Even in Kentucky, places like that. So what is determining that? Is it, we're just not
age,
just age. So that 8 will turn into a 10.
Oh yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. He's got to get past his second birthday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like really, that's our deer around here. If you went to a local processor, like, the average buck that's killed around here is 2 to 2.5, maybe 3.
For sure.
You let that deer get to 6. Even
4.5, man. If you can just let him get to 4.5, there is a huge difference between 2.5 and 4.5.
Absolutely.
There's a huge difference in how big their body is. There's a huge difference in how big their rack is. They're just maturing.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the difference between a 16-year-old boy and a 21-year-old man.
Yeah.
That is essentially the line that you're crossing with that deer at that point.
Yeah, and I don't know. Again, this is more of a question than a statement, but I've I've read a lot of stuff that say that by the time a deer is 4.5 or so years old, that they may put on more weight body wise and that kind of thing, but antler wise, they're kind of becoming what they're going to be. They may grow a little bit more, but by 4.5, 5, they're kind of what they are as far as not that they're going to start declining after that, but that the biggest jump, like you were saying, John, is going to be in that 3 to 4.5, 5-year-old. Right?
Yeah, and I think they're still going to put mass on.
Absolutely.
I don't think, from what I have seen in the things that I've read, reading stuff that Dr. Deer does and some guys from the UGA Deer Lab and things like that, I don't think that you see that huge degradation until you get like 7+.
Absolutely.
That's where you really start seeing things change. You see this big, the back starting to swoop.
It start looking like me.
You start seeing that brisket starting to kind of hang down, right? I mean, things start changing.
Gravity sets in.
Yeah, gravity sets in, and so I think that's where that happens. I bet you there hasn't been a 7-year-old deer killed in Bullitt County in 15 years.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose.
Not unless it was with a car.
Yeah,
I mean, seriously.
No,
that's why I was saying everybody talks about trophy management.
Yeah.
And because it feels so good to say it.
Yeah.
It feels so good to say an ethical kill. Whereas if you're not practicing, bro, you're just happy you hit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't tell me you're looking for an ethical shot when I know good and well you hadn't even been practicing.
Yeah.
When you come in here on opening day and you're like, man, I missed, I don't know what happened. And I say, well, tell me about what was going on when you were practicing. Well, I got my bow out Thursday and shot it 4 times and everything felt good. So
I was dialed in.
I hit. I mean, I was
dialed.
I was within a paper plate.
Yeah. Good night. So that's what I'm talking about when I look at, people love to say, they kind of love to key in on those key words.
Yeah.
But in reality, they're just wanting to get out and hunt.
Yeah.
And that is fine. If you just want to get out and hunt, go and do it. I care more about you being outside, being in creation, harvesting your own food than I care about you trying to grow a big deer. I'm fine with that. I've never ever tried to eat an antler.
Yeah.
Not one single time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm okay with shooting does.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I have no
honestly,
problem with that.
on that topic, I almost feel like Georgia or most southeastern states should be on a got to kill a doe to get a buck tag. Like,
well,
to get our numbers down a little bit. Like,
we get 10 doe tags.
No, I know, but I almost like in my mind, I try to kill 2 to 3 does off the rip. Like as the season starts, like I'll get 2 to 3 does is my goal. Like before we start getting even close to October, that way that I've already got that out the way. Now, does it always work out that way? No, absolutely not. But in my head, that's my goal is 2 to 3 off the rip. That way I've still got some opportunities if I want to kill a couple of extras because we normally household of 4, we're 6 to 7 deer we'll eat in a year. So I normally try to get 3-ish does off the rip, and then as the season goes, I'll try to get some more. But if you're focused on bucks, kill your does early, and then that way the rest of the season you can kind of start watching your bucks or whatever. But
yeah, and the thing about it too, and y'all may totally disagree with me on this, but the best time to kill does to me, and unfortunately, to me it falls in bow season.
Yeah.
So there's not as many people hunting because personally, like I don't want people that I'm hunting with, just to be honest, shooting does during the rut.
No, absolutely.
And so like if you can kill them early,
kill
them. And so that's kind of one of those things that it makes it where not as many people bow hunt. You don't typically kill as many deer bow hunting, but to me, that's the best time to kill them.
Best time
is September, very early October. Because I personally think the rut happens earlier than what typically people think it happens.
Well, right now is the time to determine that.
For sure.
Start watching every day. Check your trail cameras, go out on wherever you're hunting and start watching, looking for fawns. As soon as you see one, count back 200 days.
Yeah.
That's when that doe was bred.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. I saw one yesterday, actually.
You saw a fawn? Really?
Yes. 100%.
Really?
I was turkey hunting and came up on a food plot, saw a big doe at the end of the food plot, she ran across the road, and like a tiny fawn,
just a nugget.
Yes,
dang,
was with her.
That's wild.
So, October 21st.
Yeah,
that was 200 days ago. October 21st.
So that makes
21st to 24th is normally like like you be in a stand around here.
Yeah. And you really start seeing a lot of movement. I personally, and like around the 15th to 20th, it's starting to.
I think it also depends. Like we get a little cold snap, or something
you
like
get
that. Like
different weather, and you don't have hurricanes and tropical storms, and
golly.
But so.
Well, cool. I think that's good. So let's get in. We were going to talk about 1 Peter a little bit.
Yeah.
That's something you've been studying through.
Yeah, we're about to do, are in a series on 1 Peter. So,
need to roll.
Right. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, right. Sorry guys, I got a jet. But been a pleasure.
Yeah, dude.
Got it, man.
Got some things I got to tackle.
We're going to talk about Peter, and we'll talk about you a little bit.
Perfect. I appreciate that. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Go back and listen. Yeah. So you can hear what we say about you.
That's right.
All that stuff that Jay said earlier.
Yeah, that was all bull crap. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So Peter obviously was one of the apostles. He had he has a sordid story. Yeah. Of being really, really good and making some mistakes along the way. And, the restoration that he had with his relationship with Jesus is something that should inspire all of us by the grace and the mercy that Jesus, that our Lord is willing to show towards us.
Yeah.
So I take a lot of comfort in Peter's story, honestly.
Right.
But yeah, share with us some of your thoughts on having gone through and studied this book here recently in your preparation.
So really, like you said, Peter was such an interesting person just in general. He was a fisherman. Jesus called him out of that to become a fisher of men. And you see, as he walked with Jesus, I don't think Peter was probably high IQ. He's probably a little bit like me, a little bit stubborn, a little bit dense. Takes him a while to catch on to some things. And so you can see in the book, though, that the thing he didn't lack was a zeal and a passion. And that's the thing that I love the most about him is he was willing to take chances. He got out of a boat to walk on water. He had a lot of zeal for the Lord. He cut a man's ear off only because he missed.
He was trying to kill him. I mean,
yeah. And, so there was because they were coming after Jesus. And so there's so much that I appreciate and can relate, like you said, to Peter. He was usually one who would speak without a whole lot of a filter, it seems like. But he's also the one, and I love this in Matthew 16, when Jesus asked the disciples, who do people say I am? And they're like, some say John the Baptist, some say prophet, some say Elijah, different things. And he says, well, who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God.
Yeah,
and
you're
he
the Christ,
says,
yeah.
Jesus says, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by God. And yet it had to be so confusing for Peter, because a few verses later, when Jesus is telling him that he's got to go and die and he'll be raised in 3 days, and Peter's like, never, Lord, this isn't going to happen to you. We're not going to let this happen to you, kind of thing. And Jesus is like, get behind me, Satan.
Yeah, calls him Satan. Yeah.
And he had just told him that you're the rock upon which the church is going to be
name.
built.
That's kind of when that transaction took place, where he changed his name from Simon to Peter. And Peter means, the rock.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was. Whew.
And so, but really, I think the issue there for one is when Jesus says, upon this rock I will build my church, he's not referring to Peter the person. Mm-hmm. He's referring to the revelation of who Jesus is. So I know, and I don't mean to be touchy on this, but I know we're going through this thing right now where they're picking the next pope. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the papacy came from that passage, that upon this rock I will build my church. And so the pope is supposed to be a descendant of Peter. And so when we look at this, to me, that is something that got really taken out of context, because it's not Peter the person, it's the revelation of who Jesus is. The church is built upon. The church is built upon the apostles and prophets, the revelation, the truth that Jesus and God the Father through the Spirit gave to his apostles and prophets as they wrote the scripture, and the truth was revealed. That is what the church is built upon. And so when we look at that, I think that's really something we need to note, is that Peter was not somehow more highly elevated than the other apostles. In fact, I mean, the one that was closest to Jesus was John. And so, so much so that John refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved, instead of calling himself, John. And so, at the Last Supper, John is the one who's reclining upon Jesus's chest, which is pretty cool if you think about it, because he could have put his head to Jesus's chest and literally heard the heartbeat of God. That's kind of crazy. Yeah. The heartbeat of God in the flesh. And so that's kind of a crazy thought. But so Peter was just a really interesting person, tough guy. Like we don't realize how tough these apostles and Jesus really were. I mean, they weren't sissy men. You see that from Peter's actions in Scripture. But you get to 1 Peter, and he's writing to a predominantly Gentile, which Gentile is just people who are non-Jews.
It's us.
Yeah, it's us. Yeah. Yep. So we're not ethnically Jews. If we're Christian, we're not religiously Jews from that standpoint. But he's writing predominantly to Gentiles, non-Jews, and he's encouraging them because they're going through a lot of persecution, and he's encouraging them to stand firm in their faith. And so you get into it, and what you see a lot with Scripture in general, but in 1 Peter in particular, is you see a lot of, I guess you could call them commands or things that he's telling them to do. A
lot of direction.
Yeah.
Right. He's trying to lead them, because they're trying, specifically with these folks, they're trying to live. They're trying to lead different lives.
And if you think about it, to me, the book of 1 Peter sort of parallels the book of Hebrews, but in a different way. So Hebrews was written to Hebrews, to Jewish people who were facing persecution, and the threat was that they would turn back to Judaism. And so really, if you look at Hebrews, it talks about throughout the book of Hebrews how Jesus is greater than Judaism in and of itself, that he is the fulfillment of the Jewish faith. And so he's telling them, Jesus is greater than the temple. He's greater than the old priesthood. He's greater than the old sacrifices. The message he brought is greater because it came straight from God's Son. It didn't come to Moses through angels. So the book of Hebrews is written to try to encourage Jews to not fall away. Well, 1 Peter is really written a lot to Gentiles to encourage them not to fall away. And so if you read it, there are a lot of commands, directions, do this, do that. But the interesting thing about it is Peter never gives a command without giving a reason for fulfilling that command. So even if you look over in 1 Peter chapter 2, he says in verse 1, he says, "Therefore rid yourself of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation." And he says this. So he gives them that command, and he says, now that you've tasted that the Lord is good. And so he's like, these are things you should do, but you know how good the Lord is. And when you look at this, 1 Peter is really a book that is encouraging them. As you begin reading in 1 Peter 1, he uses words like the elect, the exiles, those who've been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God through the sanctifying work of Christ. And so he's using words that are very Jewish. And so what he's trying to get them to see is that you are not second-class citizens in the kingdom. The same promises that have been given to the Jewish people and the Jewish believers, those promises are just as true for you.
Which is, at the time, that was what they were constantly being told.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
yes.
They were the Romans called the Jews dogs.
Yes.
The Jewish people called the Gentiles dogs.
Exactly.
Right? So there was this
they were low on the
there was this huge
the hierarchy.
There was these huge contrasts of class
yes.
in that society,
yes.
in that culture. And we don't really appreciate or understand that very well,
right,
in our Western society.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, we kind of do have some.
We
classes.
might make some different character, like some different comparisons in some ways,
but it's still not close.
Different.
Yeah,
it's still not apples
different.
to apples.
Right.
And but you see where Peter is encouraging them that their inheritance is the same as the Jewish believers. And so if you read 1 Peter, you can go through there. I mean, take a notebook or something and just write down all the things that he says we have received through Christ that should motivate us to hang on. Just persevere. Just keep stepping. Just keep taking. When you can't take one more step, take one more step. Like lean into Jesus. Lean into the Spirit through which you've been born again. Lean into his grace and his ability. And he's wanting them to see that you're this people, and he says this later, he says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, now you have received mercy. And so he wants them to understand that you have been brought into this great inheritance, which is their salvation, right? That ultimately, and we think about salvation as being a moment in time, but the fullness of our salvation will not be realized until eternity. Like, there's so much more to it. We've been given the Holy Spirit right now, but the Bible says he is a foretaste. And so Peter's saying, as good as the Lord and it tastes right now, like, you don't have any idea.
Yeah, this ain't nothing.
Yeah, this is nothing. And you think about Paul writing and saying, you know, and he's talking about all the things he's been through, the things that the other Christians are going through. And he says, I consider these light and momentary afflictions to not compare to the glory that awaits us in eternity. Yep. And you think about Paul was shipwrecked 3 times, snake bitten, beaten, all these things. And he says these are light and momentary compared to what awaits us. And so much of 1 Peter is just the encouragement to hold on, to stand firm, to realize the enemy is trying to drive a wedge between you and Christ. Don't turn back to your pagan ways. And he wants them to become this new community. And even it gets into some things that can be really controversial in our day when it talks about wives submitting to husbands and different things like that in chapter 3. But we have to understand the culture in which that was written. So Peter is wanting these Gentile believers to live in a way that is so contrary to the Roman household that it sets them apart. And so the Roman household was so, the man was so domineering over the rest of the family. It was almost like they were the Lord in that sense, you know. And so, but what he's trying to lay out is a healthy way for the family to operate. It's not to make it worse. It's to say, if you will live your life, women, by letting the inward beauty of the Lord in you shine, then it's going to look so different from the Roman women and the pagan women who try to adorn themselves and only have an outward beauty. He's saying, wives, if you submit to your husbands and if your husbands submit themselves to the Lord, like, this is going to look so different from the culture around you that you as Scripture says, that you are going to shine like stars in the night sky. And so he's really wanting them to catch this vision of what God wants for them and why it's worth persevering. And he talks about how even though now you suffer for a little while, like, there is such an eternal prize waiting for you. And, you know, we look at this and the reality is that we're not really going through a persecution for our faith much. It's probably a little more now than it has been in the past, but we're not enduring anything like what these folks are enduring. at this time. But it's still a great encouragement for us because life is tough. And even in our world where a lot of times our problems are first world problems, right? But there's still trials and challenges and difficulties. And yet we can look at this and realize that God, one, has given us this incredible eternal promise of the fulfillment of our salvation and relationship with him that is going to far exceed anything we endure here. But also that in the meantime, we are strangers in this land and we belong to a new community and we belong to a new kingdom, and we've been taken from this kingdom of darkness and brought into the kingdom of God's Son whom he loves. And so we have a purpose while we're here to shine like stars in a night sky, to be this new and different, unique community, and to show the world who Christ is because of who we are now in Christ. And so that's a somewhat brief synopsis, I guess, of the book of 1 Peter. But if you can read 1 Peter with a couple of thoughts in mind. One, he's writing to extremely persecuted Gentiles. And two, he's writing to them to encourage them that they are now the new part of this new community of people that belong to God and are called to fulfill the purposes of God. If you read it through that lens, it really starts to tie together. And if you really stop, and even when you get to something that says, wives in the same way submit to yourselves to your own husbands, and you get to that and you go, hold on a minute. But you back up and you go, okay, he's writing to a people who are in a, quote, foreign land because they're now like the exiles from the Old Testament with the Jews. He's saying, you're called to be different. And so you can start seeing the thread of that run through everything that he says in this letter, encouraging them to persevere and encouraging them to set themselves apart as God's holy people. And it's a really great book. Like, I mean, it should be. It's in the Bible, but this letter.
I mean, I think that what I encourage people to do is remember that this was a letter.
Yes.
So if you've never done this before, sit down and turn to the book of 1 Peter and just read the whole letter.
Yeah.
Read the whole thing through.
Yep.
And then go back into it and look at some of those key points and try to understand it better. Reach out to us if you want to, and we'll help you, go through it. And if we can't answer your questions, we'll help you. We'll help you find an answer to any kind of question that you have. Because, like Brandon was saying, this little letter, this little 5-chapter letter is rich.
Yeah.
And he doesn't stop with saying husbands or wives submit to your husbands.
Exactly.
He goes on to say husbands
in the same way.
Yeah, likewise.
Be considerate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then he says, be considerate as you live with your wives, treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. And even the weaker partner part in our world today can be taken as, well, am I not equal? Well, it's not a thing of equality of worth and value, but, and I'll just go there, like as we look in trans athletes in women's sports, there is a difference.
Absolutely.
And what was happening in Roman society is the men were taking advantage of the women as a weaker partner, as someone who they could push around, they could dominate. And he's saying, we're not going to be like that.
Yep.
We're going to treat our wives as Christ treated the church, and we're going to lay down our lives for them, and we're going to treat them in a way that glorifies God. And he even says, you need to do this so it doesn't hinder your prayers.
Yeah. I mean, if you need to hear anything, listen to what it says right there. So that is chapter 3, verse 7. It talks about your relationship with your wife affects your relationship with God the Father.
Absolutely.
Okay. If your prayers are going to be hindered, that is our connection with God the Father. So that should be incentive enough for us to say, I'm going to honor my wife. And guys, I don't know at what point this happens. I've been married I have been married to my wife. October will be 22 years. And I've never referred to my wife as my old lady.
Well, and yes, 100%, man.
I don't know at what point you begin referring to your wife as your old lady, but
don't.
Is that really honoring your wife? You know, I mean, and I know, okay, that's a simple thing, John. You're nitpicking or what? Just it's the little things about how you think about somebody, determines if you are honoring them or if you're not.
Yeah, and I'll talk to guys, and I'll have heard them refer to their wife as like the old ball and chain.
Yeah,
and then they're like, man, you know, we don't hardly ever have sex. I'm like, probably because you call her the ball and chain. Like, I mean, you think you're going to be like, hey, old lady, come over here, ball and chain, and she's just going to fall into your arms? Like, no. I mean,
that ain't the way
that's
it
not,
works.
it's like you said, it's not respecting her. It's not treating her well. And again, it's not in judgment either, because we can all do better. You know, there's always room to grow in how we love our wives as Christ loves the church, and, you know, and how we lead our families. So it's not to say, hey, you suck, but maybe what we're saying sometimes sucks. So
hopefully it never feels like we're coming at you from a place of authority or from a place of, you know, we've got this figured out and you don't. Whether we're talking about shooting bows or doing food plots or tracking deer or anything like that, you know, we want to talk about these things and understand that we're learning as we go on a lot of this stuff too, because I feel like if we're alive, we have the opportunity to learn.
Absolutely.
You know, so I'm going to have opportunities today to grow in the way that I treat my wife if I will go into the day intentional about doing that.
That's right.
If I don't go into the day intentional about it and something happens and my wife gets upset about something and I'm just like, would you shut up? I mean, why are you so, why are you worried about this? Just don't worry about it. You know? I mean, that's not honoring my wife. That's not, you know, treating her with respect and saying, you know what? To me, this isn't really a big deal. You know, what she's upset about, this isn't really big. And I'm not talking about, you know, if I've done something wrong.
Sure.
I'm just saying if she's upset about something. But the right way to approach that is, you know, all right, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, what is it about this that upsets you? And there might be a problem in there that you need to solve.
Yeah.
There's probably not a problem in there that you need to solve, but if you'll just give your wife the respect of saying, hey, let's talk through this and let her talk it out. Yeah. You know, just like there's differences between men and women on the playing field, there's differences between men and women about how they process things mentally and emotionally.
Sure. And
respecting our wives can be as simple as just letting them talk.
And it's multi-layered, man. It gets really complicated sometimes in marriages and relationships because things have gone on so long in ways that they shouldn't. But at some point, just beginning to take steps to move in the right direction. And somebody's got to be the bigger person. And, you know, really biblically, that's the man. And so in a lot of ways, it's literally manning up and having to maybe be the one who does apologize, even if you feel like you weren't in the wrong or whatever it might take to begin to set that relationship on the right track, and or go see somebody, go talk through it all with somebody. You know, I mean, I've had to meet with folks because they couldn't have a discussion without blowing up. You know? And it's like they needed somebody who could, but just don't give up on it. Like another thing you hear is like how bad marriage is, right? That's sort of the cultural view of marriage, and yet marriage done God's way is really good. And so not giving up on what God has called good, you know, I think it's real important. But I love what you said. Yes.
Very good.
And
I love it.
And so I love what you said about the intentionality. You know, if we aren't intentional about the things that are most important in our life, then we're just going to drift through life.
Mm-hmm.
And one day becomes like the next. And pretty soon 10 years have gone by. And we never drift towards God. Like, there has to be an intentionality there. There has to be an intentionality. We never drift towards a healthier marriage. We never drift towards healthier friendships. There has to be an intentionality towards those things, because our nature is we're going to always drift away from those things. And so I think being intentional, taking one day at a time, this is something that the Lord's been dealing with me on. One day at a time, walk with me today, do what I lead you to today, and I'll do it again tomorrow. But be intentional in that today. You know, I think is so important, because one day can turn into the next, and we get busy and nothing changes, and it only drifts away from God's design more so. It's just not gonna, you're not gonna wake up 40 years from now having accidentally grown closer to God. You know, it's just not gonna happen.
No, it's not.
So.
Absolutely not. All right, guys. Well, we'll cut her off there. Thanks for joining us, and we'll do it again shortly.
Yep. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed listening. Hey, reach out to us and let us know what you want to hear about. Join the conversation online. Hop over on your favorite social channel and give us some comments. Shoot us an email. You can email us at podcast@bowtreader.com. That's BOWTREADER.com. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear about maybe if you want to come join us on the podcast, or any kind of topics that you want us to cover, regardless of what it is. If it's hunting related, something that's specific to bows or arrows, new gear, old gear, if you got any kind of spiritual questions, anything about your faith that you're interested in, reach out to us and let us know. We'd love to cover it for you. And thank you again so much for listening. God bless you.